Hey there everyone, this is Samuel Johnson and welcome back to the Steven Universe Retrospectives, and today we're going to be discussing episodes 65 and 66 of Steven Universe, Onion Friend and Historical Friction. Now when we last left our valiant heroes of Crystal Gems, the team was, well, kind of in disarray, to put it nicely. You see, Peridot wound up rebuilding the communication hub that Sugalite wound up smashing into in Season 1, and was using it in an attempt to call out to Homeworld to get her off of Earth. To take it down, Garnet and Pearl wound up fusing into a new fusion called Sardonyx, who wound up just dismantling the whole thing. However, for whatever reason, the communication hub wound up getting rebuilt, so while Steven and Amethyst were investigating, they found out the person who had rebuilt it was Pearl. Why? So that she and Garnet could fuse back into Sardonyx and take it down again. As such, they wound up revealing this information to Garnet and Pearl when they were about to fuse again to take it down a third time, and put simply, when Garnet heard the news, she didn't take it well. The end results, the team wound up kind of going into disarray. Garnet and Pearl are barely talking to each other. Pearl feels guilty for having tricked Garnet, and Garnet is just angry that her trust was violated so much. And put simply, the team is just trying to figure out how to deal with this, move on, heal, and but also dealing with the turmoil that came about it. As well as trying to rebuild the trust, which is where these episodes come in. Well, sort of. These episodes are kind of filler arcs. Are these episodes? Well, not filler arcs. These are just filler episodes for the overall arc. They're not bad, and there are still elements of the overall plot in them, but put simply, these can be mostly skipped. But does that mean they're bad? Well, again, let's watch them and find out, starting with Onion Friend. In Onion Friend, well, as the title of the episode implies, onion's another major part of the story. What happens is that Steven is making himself an afternoon snack, which in this case is an egg, fish, and I think cream cheese sandwich on a bagel, but he wants to add a side of buffalo style chips, which Onion ends up stealing. Steven when he sees this ends up chasing after Onion to get the chips back, and he ends up chasing him all the way back to Onion's home. However, when Steven enters the home, specifically through the garage, he finds that the whole place is just decked out in paintings of Amethyst. Freaked out, he ends up running away and getting Amethyst to come check it out, who she's actually a bit weirded out by this too. However, as they're standing there, the home's owner comes in and pretty much starts yelling at them, wondering how she doesn't know how she got in, but this is private property. That is till the owner of said home sees Steven and Amethyst, and it turns out Amethyst knows this person. So remember back in Story for Steven when Marty was hitting on that girl, Vidalia? This is her. Yeah. It turns out Vidalia and Amethyst became friends. According to Amethyst, they started hanging out together because they were both friends of Greg, but they found they had more in common with each other, so they just started hanging out on their own. And so they just started building a friendship. And I'm just gonna say a spoiler right now. Sour Cream, remember him? He's Marty's son. Yeah, we see him in this episode. Oh, and yeah, another big thing. Vidalia is Onion's mother. It turns out that after her stint with Marty, she wound up getting together with Onion's father, Yellowtail, the fisherman, and well, they've just been a family. They've been a family ever since. Well, it has not been easy, as Vidalia points out, as Yellowtail and Sour Cream have clashed on occasion. At the very least, it's still a life that she's content with, and she's basically she still does her best to be a good mother. And Amethyst, now seeing her old friend, wants to just catch up, and so she and Steven decide to hang out. Well, more like she kind of pulls Steven into hanging out. Every time Steven sees Onion throughout the episode, he's just creeped out and is just looking for any excuse to leave. Like when when Vidalia invites him to stay for dinner, Steven immediately wants to get out as soon as he finishes his meal because Onion crafted his food to look like his head, and then licked it and spit it out. It was gross. And then when Steven tries to leave, Amethyst, no, let's just stay around. We gotta hang out. Me and Vidalia gotta catch up. You and Onion go hang out. So Steven goes to hang out with Onion in his room, and just the whole time Steven is creeped out. By Onion, and just finds everything about him weird. He's got a pet snake. Like he wants Steven to feed up a mouse to his pet snake, which Steven doesn't have the heart to do. He tries to show Steven a video. It turns out the video is of his birth. And the less egregious of examples he jumps off a trampoline to jump on his bed. I mean, it's weird, but can't doubt the kid for having fun there, but whatever. Bottom line, Steven finally draws the line when Onion tries to beckon him to come into a hole in his wall, and at that point, Steven's like, screw this, I'm out. And he tries to go downstairs and tell Amethyst, let's leave, but he ends up overhearing Amethyst and Vidalia talking, and they both start confiding in each other. Vidalia mentions how she and Yellowtail and Sour Cream don't always get along, and things can get hectic there. Hence why she's been painting Amethyst again, because, well, she felt that Amethyst was free spirit and she looked up to her in some way. But likewise, Amethyst kind of confides in her and Vidalia just how trapped she's been feeling at the temple with Pearl and Garnet not getting along. That everything just feels tense. It feels tense. She doesn't really know how to deal with it, and she just kind of needs a break. Hence why she's been wanting to catch up with Vidalia, because in Amethyst's mind, Vidalia was the free spirit. She was the one trying all the new things, and I kind of like this because, again, it also shows more of it also kind of helps expand more on Amethyst's character and shows more of how the conflict between Garnet and Pearl is affecting more than just them. We saw that with Steven in the Keystone Motel episode, but at the same time, I do like that we see this also kind of affecting Amethyst, and how now that she's reconnected with someone from her past, she finds that to be just kind of like a mini escape. And likewise, the friend confides in her, and the friend mentions how she looked up to Amethyst, and how she looked up to Amethyst, and how she's been finding, and how she's been finding more inspiration to kind of keep going because of that. I like that. And as such, Steven realizes Amethyst kind of needs this more than him, so he decides screw it, goes back to Onion, and he follows him through the hole, and sure enough, it wasn't actually a trap. Turns out the hole is an air vent that leads to a secret room in the house where Onion's been storing his collection of guys, those things that Steven kept in capsules. On top of that, there's also a collection of these side characters called gals, which are like guys except they're girls. And what I love is that as Steven's going through it, it's like architect girl, something else, or architect gal, something else gal, Karen. I don't know why. I love the fact that when he gets to Karen, he's like, Karen. It's like, I'm just imagining that character. I'm just imagining that gal's whole character that she bitches at the manager. But point is, as they're looking through, eventually Onion winds up giving Steven one of the gals. I forgot which one it was. But bottom line, Steven takes it nicely. It's a token of friendship, and the episode ends with Steven and Amethyst finally heading home. But Amethyst stating that maybe Vidalia, if she ever wants to talk, maybe she should come over to the temple and they can hang out. And Vidalia says, yeah, maybe Steven and Onion could hang out too. And Steven kind of reluctantly kind of agrees, because at the end he sees Onion staring at him, and Onion opened his mouth, and there's the mouse he wants Steven to feed his snake. And yeah, it's weird. It's weird. Very weird. But let's get to historical friction next. This one is less weird. In this case, we once again get the reappearance of Jamie the Mailman, and it turns out he did follow Garnet's advice into starting with local theater. He's actually starring in a local production about the town's founding. In this case, Mayor Dewey? Well, it turns out his family founded Beach City, and in this case, he's funding a play to pretty much reenact Beach City's founding by his great grandfather, William Dewey. And Steven, upon hearing of the auditions, wants to jump in, and Steven ends up getting the part because he's the only one that actually showed up. Unfortunately, though, the play itself sucks. Yeah, it turns out Mayor Dewey, in an attempt to make his family name look amazing, instead wound up writing his great-great-great-great-grandfather as a Gary Stew, making him perfect in everything, liked by everybody, having fucking supernatural powers, which he uses to get his ship out of everything. And while Jamie does try to kindly ask the mayor if he can rewrite it, the mayor is not taking no for an answer and says, no, this play is perfect, do it as is or your funding's cut, yada yada yada, blah blah blah. And yeah, Jamie is distraught over this because he thinks the play sucks. William Dewey is just too perfect, and he thinks the play is just going to bomb, and that his acting career is going to be over before it's even begun. Steven at first did like the play, but it's Steven, that makes sense. But once he hears Jamie's woes, he starts to realize, oh, you actually have a point. As such, he ends up taking his copy of the script back to the temple with him, where he runs into Pearl, who's still sulking. And we get into some more character stuff as Steven talks about how William Dewey was perfect and never got everything wrong. Pearl laments that she wishes she was like that, but Steven says no, but you're supposed to have flaws. You're supposed to be able to work through, and yeah, it's gonna be hard. You're gonna make mistakes, but you just gotta keep going, and that's what makes it interesting. And That's what makes it that's what makes it interesting. What makes us who we are. And Pearl actually thinks, well, that's actually pretty wise. How'd you get so wise? But Steven says the play doesn't actually showcase that. And when Pearl learns that it's about William Dewey, she's like, well, how do you know him? And yeah, Pearl admits that she was actually there, which not surprising considering how long the crystal gems have been around. But the point is, Steven ends up showing her the play, and put simply, she thinks it's garbage. Not just because it makes not just because it makes William Dewey a Gary Stu character, but because it's just very historically inaccurate. As such, she and Steven end up doing some rewrites to the play, and when Steven shows those rewrites to Jamie, he and Steven decide to go with this play. Though Jamie's a bit reluctant because, again, if this doesn't work out, then Mayor Dewey's going to have his hide. But on with the show they go as they end up broadcasting the play, and while Mayor Dewey's version of the play had William Dewey be a Gary Stu super perfect guy, the actual version turns out he was a dunce. Yeah, the reason it turns out that in this version of events, he set out for the New World not because he wanted to show how perfect he was. It's because he was trying to just kind of start over. As apparently back at home, he was just a failure, and this is just his attempt to just keep going, keep trying, and well, even now he's kind of feeling lost as he and his crew don't really have anywhere to go. As not helped by the fact that as they were going along the sea, they end up running into the crystal gems, who tell them that if they go to the new land, they probably won't last very long because it's very dangerous. I'm guessing they're talking about the gem monsters, but don't quote me on that. And as such, Mayor Dewey at first did heed their warnings, but he wound up screwing up the sail, and so the ship got lost at sea as it got caught in a tropical storm. His first mate, Buddy, wound up apparently falling off shore as they wound up dealing with the monster, but thankfully they get help from the crystal gems in the form of a fusion that I'm not going to talk about until the end of the series, because that's when it makes its official debut. But although it does make me wonder about one certain fact about the play, but I'll get to that later, much later. Actually, I'm not even going to talk about it, but whatever. But point is, this giant fusion managed to take care of the monster, and it turns out this is the giant person that managed to get the ship to shore safely. However, it once again warns Mayor Dewey that this land is still dangerous, but he still wants to go for it and still wants to make something of and still wants to actually make something. As such, the fusion leaves him be, and at first he's ready to name the new land for his first mate, Buddy, until he washes ashore and says, okay. So they say, okay, Beach City it is. And the play ends with vote for Dewey. Well, at first, Mayor Dewey is a bit flabbergasted by this play when he sees that everybody likes it and that everyone actually liked that William Dewey was a flawed human that kept trying despite all of his failures. Well, he is actually more forgiving, and so he congratulates Steven and Jamie for putting on a good play. He thanks Pearl for preserving his family name. Pearl tells him, well, it's 200 years between friends, which I think is hilarious because he did try to hit on Pearl again in the episode. And the episode ends with Pearl questioning the vote for Mayor Dewey slogan they put at the end of the play. So, okay, yeah. Do I like these episodes? Yes, I do. But but like I said in the beginning of this video, they're just filler. In the grand scheme of the current story arc, these episodes add very little. There is character stuff in them, which I'm going to go over in a minute, but for the most part, they're just filler. I can honestly say that if you skipped over these episodes, I don't think you would miss much. Again, there is character stuff. There are things in both of these episodes that do work. It's just again, filler. But with that said, what are the episodes do work? Again, let's go back to the stuff that adds to the overarching story. The stuff with Amethyst and Pearl in both of these episodes, I think is a good way of showing them trying to deal with the current tension in the team. In the case of Amethyst, we see this from the view of an outsider, which, like I said, we did see that briefly with Steven in the Keystone Motel episode, because in that particular sense, Steven was the troubled child. He was the one getting caught in the middle of everything, and unfortunately, because the conflict continued going on, even when he tried making it better, it started to make him feel as though he was the problem, which ultimately did lead to some good character development on Garnet, Ruby, and Sapphire's parts, because it allowed them to realize that they weren't the only ones being affected by this, and that they have to also be mindful of the people there, of the people being caught in the middle. That's which I thought was actually interesting. Which I thought worked for that episode. But in the case of Onion Friend, how we see this affecting Amethyst is that she's the passive outsider. She sees Pearl and Garnet at each other's throats, and well, like Steven, she's caught in the middle. She doesn't really have anything to do with the conflict aside from being the one that exposed it, but it also leaves the whole thing, it leaves the whole air of the Crystal Gems just full of tension. They can barely talk to Garnet and Pearl can barely talk to each other, and Pearl is just, and Amethyst feels like she's just, well, suffocating. She can't do anything to fix the problem, and the more she's kind of observing it, the more she feels like she's trapped by it, which I understand. I have been there when there's been a conflict going on, and while I've had no major part in it, it's still something I'm tied to. And while and unfortunately, you can't just detach yourself from the situation. Even if you're not the one that's involved in the active argument, it still feels as though you are tied to this, and that people you care about are being ripped apart. And sadly, and even the more you try to hold them together, the more you feel like you're indirectly responsible. Which could be what happens which is a nice way of reflecting what happened with Steven in the previous episode. And in the case of Amethyst, she just feels drained. Hence why when she met up with Vidalia again, she wanted to go hang out with her. Because with Vidalia, there's peace, there's safety, there's a way out. Yeah, it's not like she's running away from the Crystal Gems, but at the very least, she feels content to be able to talk to someone who she can confide in, that she can talk to, that she can actually share her feelings with, that she can also listen to her as well. It's very nice, and I do like showcasing that. I do like that they're showcasing that. I like seeing how and as a result, sorry, I'm getting tongue tied right now. I like that we see Amethyst essentially dealing with this in her own way. It's again a good way of showcasing just how the conflict is affecting the team as a whole, not just Pearl and Garnet, but also a good way of continuing to showcase more of Amethyst, as Amethyst feels like she's just trapped, and sadly she can't really do anything to get out of it. It's actually it's pretty good drama, and I think it works well. And then likewise in Historical Friction with Pearl, we see her still trying to make amends. And not just with Garnet, but with herself. The thing is, when you fuck up, it can hurt, especially when you know what you've done wrong and you're just trying to make up for it. You try to do something, like, even if that's not who you are as a person, the fact that you know, I sunk that low, I was weak, and I hurt people I cared about, it can hurt like hell. And as we've seen with and the thing is, like I said, we said in the previous vlog, what Pearl did wasn't just a mistake. She violated her friend's trust, her sanctity. She crossed a line. And yes, she's trying to make up for it. She's trying to do better, but you can still see it hanging over her. You can still see it having an effect on her. You can see the guilt eating away at her, which in a way is probably deserved, but at the same time, if she wants to get better and make sure she doesn't do that again, she needs to learn to move past it. Which is another way I think what I like with Steven when he goes to talk to her, is that the advice does help. The advice that he gives her, even if it wasn't unintentional, does apply to her situation. People are flawed. People make mistakes. But what makes us human is that we have to accept those mistakes and just keep going forward. We can't change the past, but we can work to try and make a better future. And likewise, that's what Pearl kind of has to learn with that, what Pearl has to kind of deal with. Why she reacts the way she does when Steven tells her about the perfect Mayor Dewey or perfect William Dewey, and how if they want to make everything better, that ultimately if they want to make him something better, then has to be someone who's flawed but can move on and showcase that weakness can be turned into strength. Which I like. It feeds more into how Pearl's dealing with it, and all also still being a part of the episode. Which, another thing I like in the episode, when Pearl does go to see the play, and which leads to the scene where Mayor Dewey tries to hit on her, and it leads to a very funny scene where the instant Pearl realizes that he's hitting on her, she's just like, nope, gets up from her seat and just goes to the back. I love it. And the instant Steven's on the play, she's just calling out, like, oh, Steven, hi, Steven! It's like an excited parent. It's kind of adorable. But That again, the stuff with Pearl, I do like. I do like that it's still having effect on her, and that it actually is, and that we actually is some minor stuff that helps kind of showcase the arc that she needs to go through as well. So yeah, I like that. But with that being said, the episodes as a whole, aside from the stuff that feeds into the story, into the plots, they're all right. Well, Onion Friend more than historical friction. Onion Friend, as a whole, feels very odd to say the least, which is a propos considering that it's Onion, but Onion is. Let me put it this way. So you know how Ronaldo is written to be the annoying guy who thinks he's the center of attention, and they do the job too well with him. It's a similar case with Onion, except whereas Ronaldo is annoying, Onion's fucking creepy. Now, to be fair, the episode tries to showcase that he has layers to him. And yes, I get the unintentional stealth pun of onions have layers. Do not point that out to me. But throughout the episode, while he doesn't talk, so to speak, you can tell he's trying to make Steven feel comfortable in his home. When Steven finds issue with him jumping on the bed, even though there's a trampoline, he stops. When he tries to get Steven to feed his snake and Steven can't do it, as I said, he keeps the mouse alive. When he tries showing Steven the video of his own birth and Steven gets disgusted, he turns it off, which is what leads to him showing Steven the guys and gals. Because he is trying to make Steven feel comfortable in his home. It's just that it's Onion. Onion's creepy. Onion is disturbing and basically he operates by his own rules. So it's still very unnerving. Again, but at the same time, it is still nice to see Steven trying to put up with that for the sake of Amethyst. And I do kind of like that Onion is not just the creepy kid. I mean, that's still a large part of his character, but it's nice to see that more. But at the same time, again, it's Onion. This is the kid who periodically steals Steven's shit because he can, does not eat food, and any food he does eat, he spits right back out, and he has a video of his own birth, and who by the end of the episode, how he showcases Steven that the mouse is alive was by opening his mouth and spitting it out. Yeah, the episode was trying to showcase that there was more to Onion than meets the eye. It kind of fell short in that regard. To be fair, there is some weird entertainment in seeing that and seeing Onion just being creepy and Steven acting the way that any normal person would react to all this stuff with Onion. But at the very least, it's still very to me. It still feels very creepy. Ultimately, again, and as a result, the episode doesn't really feel like anything big. It just feels odd, to say the least. Just very odd. Not awful, not bad, just odd, which is why it still feels like it falls into the okay category for me. It still does well with showcasing the stuff with Amethyst. I like seeing Vidalia again and seeing kind of more follow-up with that. I do like seeing more as we see more businesses in the Beach City, as well as establishing a connection between Sour Cream, Vidalia, Onion, and, yes, Morty! But overall, it's just an okay episode. Historical Friction is the one that I think is the better of the two. Historical Friction, I think, is a nice one because, again, it showcases more to do with Jamie, and the plot is actually more kinetic in that regard, as it feels like there actually is a plot moving forward, and it's not just showing oddness for the sake of oddness, as we once again check back in with Jamie, and we see that he actually is trying to move forward, but is dealing with his own struggles, which, as he stated in the episode, the struggles are what make him interesting. Seeing him have to try and deal with compromises in order to get this play off the ground. Excuse me. Having to also having to deal with trying to think of ways to make the play interesting until finally by the end, when he finally has to throw caution to the wind, when he's rented with a better play and realizes, okay, I'm just going to go with this, while also still feeling nervous. There's still definitely a good story there, as we see Jamie trying to get the story off the ground, and I do like how it does feed back into Pearl's story. And when it is finally put forward and they actually do showcase that a flawed hero can still be a good hero, it ultimately does make the story feel more interesting. It's more interesting to see Jamie still trying to do his own thing and clearly nervous about it. Yes, he does still like to play up the drama of everything, but it's clear that there's a real human fear there, which I've been there. I have been, like, when I was, like I said, when I was in college, I've been in plays, and the nervousness of going up on stage, trying to get the role, trying to make sure everything goes right, it's real. It's very real, and especially when the guy behind everything is the one that's telling you to do things this way, not that way, and so on and so forth. It really does make the whole thing feel iffy, to say the least. And the way they portray it with Jamie, I think, is very nice. But at the same time, I do like the conclusion of it. By the end, they do create something that does respect Dewey's history, the Dewey family heritage, while also still showcasing the weakness and strength angle, as well as kind of showcasing more world building as we see how Beach City was founded. And since in the last episode I stated the Steven universe takes place in its own continuity, this could also be how the New World was founded in this universe. So more details there. Otherwise, though, it's still a pretty good episode. Nice to see more of Jamie. Nice to see the struggles of the play, seeing it go forward. Ultimately, seeing it all come together, and by the end, it does lead to a satisfactory conclusion as the play goes off without hitch. People like it, and Dewey realizes, yeah, this is probably the better play. So, yeah, overall, both episodes are, in their own regard, fine. They're both filler, but they're not bad filler. Onion Friend is still just okay because while I do like seeing this stuff with Amethyst, and I do like that they try to add more layers to Onion. Again, do not point out the pun to me. At the very least, it's still Onion, and Onion's still creepy, so there is still some iffiness factor there. While Historical Friction is still a pretty fun episode. Seeing Steven and Jamie interacting, I like how in sync they were in the episode. Actually, seeing them get the play off the ground, seeing them having to try and figure out how to compromise with it until finally they decide to make something that's more historically accurate. Overall, both episodes are pretty good, and those are pretty good. Well, one's pretty good, one's okay. But overall, not a bad time. So, yeah, that's about it. Thank you for watching. I'm Samuel Johnson. And while next week we shall be finally wrapping up this storyline, this Sunday, I'm going to be trying something. Whether or not it's going to be successful is up in the air. It might not be, but I'll do it anyway. But if you're interested in that, I hope you tune in on Sunday to check it out. But if not, I'll see you next week when we finally wrap up this storyline and see how the Crystal Gems come back together and how they try to move forward. So, till then, hope you have a good day. Happy holidays to you. And Merry Christmas. Happy Hanukkah. Whatever you celebrate, I hope it's merry and I hope you're enjoying yourself. And as always, I'll see you next time. Take care.